Hi, I'm Rachel Porodnik, and I am a licensed clinical social worker. This is another episode of Crimes and Minds.
Yes, my name is Joni McLeod. I'm a licensed mental health counselor in the state of New York, and both Rachel and I own our own private practices where we treat people with mental health concerns.
So today we're going to be discussing Britney and Jamie Spears, and I want to give a disclaimer before we begin. Although we are both mental health therapists, we have never treated Britney or Jamie Spears. These are our professional opinions and for entertainment purposes only. Also, a content warning. This episode of Crimes and Minds contains discussion about financial and psychological abuse, as well as themes of ending one's own life and substance abuse.
Thank you, Rachel. Where do you want to start? This is kind of a hot case with it being really current and in pop culture today.
So, overall, most of the world, it seems like, knows about Britney Spears, who she is, and the current struggle she's going through in her conservatorship. So she's a conservatee, and we will go into what that means a little bit more when we reach back at that point. But um, yeah, we can start at the very beginning with Jamie's childhood.
Yeah. So, Rachel, what I know and add in where I'm missing stuff,
Yeah,
but what I've read about Jamie Spears, and just to be clear, this is James Spears, Britney's father. She
yeah.
also has a famous sister named Jamie Lynn Spears. But whenever we say Jamie, we are specifically talking about her father. So Jamie Spears, he has a sad childhood. He was, I believe, originally one of four siblings, but one of his siblings died. And his mother just like never really recovered from that loss and that grief. His mom ended up ending her own life. And she actually ended her own life at the gravesite of her child who had died. And so it's a very heartbreaking story, a lot of trauma. Also, his dad was abusive in multiple ways. He just like would really force Jamie to play sports and, like, practice, like, nonstop, like, Jamie wouldn't get water breaks or, as a kid, like, as a little kid, and so, that was one way he was abusive, but he also it's been reported that, he was, verbally abusive as well as among other things. Jamie also was involved as a teenager in a bad car accident that killed his friend who was with him in the car. And so this is a lot of traumatic things going on during very formative years. So it was bound to impact him and his mental health and his life. What did I miss, Rachel, about his growing up years?
That was very thorough. I mean, I think that covers a lot of it.
Yeah, yeah. So, we can already see, and as professionals in the field, we already know, like, oh, this is unless he gets serious help quickly, this is not going in a good direction, right?
Yeah.
And so he did end up becoming an alcoholic. He has, and this is like been reported multiple places. So this is not my
Yeah.
opinion. This is like a known thing that he allegedly has substance use disorder with alcohol. And yeah, I mean, that is not a surprise to me at all as a mental health counselor. Um, and yeah, I'm unaware. Do you know if he was ever sober, if he ever
I don't
went into
I don't
recovery?
I don't think that he's ever been to treatment for
Okay.
alcoholism or substance abuse.
Okay. Got it. So if that is an ongoing issue into his adult life and throughout this conservatorship with Brittany, I imagine that had an impact on it, if assuming he was not sober during that time.
Yeah, so I would definitely give him a post-traumatic stress disorder
Yeah.
diagnosis.
Yeah, for multiple things, right? I would definitely say he's endured two different types of trauma. One is like the ongoing trauma of living in an abusive household. And then the other would be more of like the one time traumas, which is his mother ending her own life and his friend dying in the car accident that he was also in. So yeah, I mean, a lot of trauma there, a lot to work through, and I can only imagine because he was born, I believe, in the early 1950s. This was not a time where people went to therapy just because or because they were aware of their trauma. It really I would be shocked if he were given that service in the,
Yeah.
60s when all of this was happening.
Yeah, definitely, especially in the South
Yes.
United States. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So that's a little bit about Jamie and just like where he is coming from. And then we all know Britney Spears, right? Like pop sensation, really like brings back so much nostalgia to my childhood. And so yes, and you're probably aware of the Free Britney movement. Do you want to talk a little bit about Britney and the
Yeah.
conservatorship and like how it all started?
Definitely. So in September 2006, Brittany gave birth to her second son with her then husband, Kevin Federline.
Mhm.
And it was speculated that she suffered from postpartum depression,
Yeah,
but that was never confirmed or
right.
really treated. So
Yes.
the
And
media,
I read her book, I think you did too,
yeah, I did.
Rachel, her recent book called I believe it's called The Woman in Me.
Hmm.
And she talks about how she probably had postpartum depression.
Yeah.
But I don't know if she never got the resources for it. Again, even this was like a little over 20 years ago or around 20 years ago, it probably wasn't talked about how it is today.
Yes, definitely. So the paparazzi were always chasing her constantly, so I could imagine that would exacerbate any type of postpartum or anxiety that she would have.
Totally. I
Yeah,
cannot imagine that. Oh my gosh.
yeah. So in November, which is just a few weeks after she gave birth to her second child, she filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. So she and Kevin reached a global settlement in July 2007 and agreed to share custody of their two sons. However, she lost custody of her 2 year old and 1 year old sons for undisclosed reasons in October 2007.
Yeah.
Then, yeah, that must have been so hard.
Yeah.
And then in February 2008, she was with her kids at her home and she refused to give back one of her sons after her visitation time was up and he was due to go back to Kevin Federline.
Mhm.
So, due to this, she was involuntarily committed to a hospital.
Yeah.
So, they put her on a 5150 hold, which is she was committed involuntarily to Cedar
Yeah.
Sinai Medical Center in California.
Yeah.
And, oh,
And
sorry.
yeah, just to clarify about that for people who are not in the field. So it's different by state law. So every state can do something different. Normally, what that would mean is that they were concerned for either her own safety or someone else's safety because of her current state of mind. And so they can legally hold someone, and it's normally up to like 72 hours.
Yeah.
Again, it depends on the state, but that's usually typically what that means.
Right. So after an alleged psych eval, she was released 24 hours later, but it was during that time that the conservatorship was established. And it was established because Jamie claimed that Brittany had dementia. So,
Yes. Okay.
yeah,
Let's talk about this. So I believe today she is in like around the age of 40. And so this was, I mean, nearly 20 years ago. So she was in her 20s when this happened. And it said she had dementia. That is so incredibly rare. I don't know if that's
yeah,
ever happened
right. And I
on
just want to
record.
explain what a conservatorship is.
Yes, please.
Yes, so conservatorship is a legal concept in the United States whereby a guardian is appointed by a judge to manage the financial affairs and or daily life of another person because of physical or mental limitations. A person under conservatorship is a conservatee, a term that can refer to an adult. A conservatorship may also apply to corporations and organizations. Spears was under a probate conservatorship, a type of conservatorship that mostly lasts indefinitely. And the conservatorship may be of the estate wherein the conservator manages the conservatee's financial affairs and other monetary transactions. It may also be of the person, wherein
Mhm.
the conservator takes charge of overseeing the daily activities such as health, care, or living arrangements of the conservatee. Spears was under both a conservatorship of the state and of the person.
Yep. Yeah. So, just to clarify, it did end up being an indefinite conservatorship, but originally it was only supposed to be for those few days that she was being held at the psychiatric hospital. So that like essentially my understanding is when this happens, it's like, oh, in case a big financial decision suddenly needs to be made or something like that. However, it was extended, it kept getting extended and was eventually extended through the end of that year. And then after that, it just became indefinite, which,
And Jamie Spears was the conservator of the
yes,
estate and of her person.
and of her person, which to clarify, this means that he got to choose where she lived, who she talked to. He could monitor her phone usage. He could decide what birth control she was on and force her. So they had an IUD put in that he would not allow her to go to the doctor to get taken out. She was not allowed to like ride with partners in their car. I
She
mean
wasn't
the
allowed to drive her own car or have
yes,
her own credit card or write
yes.
her own checks. Just like
Yeah, she
horrific.
had an allowance each month, which by this time she's already incredibly famous. She's already a multimillionaire and an adult, and she has an allowance from her dad.
I think I
Uh,
read that it was $1,500 a week, but
yeah,
Jamie, for his conservator role, was getting $16,000 a month for
yeah.
the, and
So
Jamie was getting paid essentially by his daughter, Brittany.
yeah. So he was being paid almost 3 times as much, I think, as what her like allowance was. He also got to make all of her work decisions. So he forced her to take a guest role in the hit sitcom How I Met Your Mother, which I'm a fan of the show. I love the episodes that she's in, but like reading back, like, oh my gosh, she was literally forced to do this. Really just like makes it so horrible.
Yes.
And then she was forced to do her residency in Las Vegas. She was forced to do 1 or 2 tours during this time. She really had no choice in any of this.
Yeah, so that's essentially like human trafficking.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, talk about manipulation. It's not even manipulation anymore. You are actually controlling someone. Um,
And I feel like you've got to be narcissistic to do that, and
yes.
some form of antisocial personality disorder, however severe that may be, definitely traits of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, just the like, what is seemingly the lack of empathy or lack of care, not only for anyone, but for one's own kid. Um, I cannot imagine doing this to any human, but especially a family member or a child. It just seems incredibly unfair and
No.
incredibly manipulative. I also read so the conservatorship started in 2008.
Mhm.
Um, as early as 2005, Jamie openly was like, "I think Brittany needs to be in a conservatorship." And he would like go to pastors and like pray that like he could somehow be her conservator, which again, like if this is true, it just shows how manipulative it was that he was almost waiting for her to break. He was
And
almost waiting for her
yes,
for an opportunity where he could legally become her conservator.
totally. And he did file for bankruptcy. So for him to be in charge of her enormous estate and financials is just
Yeah.
really nuts. Yeah.
Yeah. It is this whole case, I was just like the misogyny,
Yeah.
like themes and not even undertones, just like straight up the misogyny that was so evident and clear. I cannot believe so she was in the conservatorship in some form from 2008 to 2021. Now, Jamie had to step down from the conservatorship in 2019 for health reasons, but she was still in it under, I believe it was like a lawyer for 2 years.
Yeah,
Uh,
and she did try to retain her own lawyer
yes,
multiple times, but the conservators said she was not mentally capable of retaining a lawyer, and so
yes.
each lawyer she chose was dismissed, so
Yep.
she had to have a court-appointed lawyer.
Yeah. Well, and even like the Human Rights Campaign got involved at one point and said, like, this is inhumane that she cannot choose her own lawyer. And even that was shot down by the court. And so it is absurd that a grown woman, I mean, even someone who's dealing with mental health concerns, even someone who, needs to have supervised visitation with her children for whatever reason. We don't know that reason, so we can't really speak to it. Um, but she does not deserve to have basic human rights taken away. I mean,
Right.
I this is like she was put in jail, is what it feels like. It just feels like a prison of the mind. And I actually was gonna read her one of her statements that she made in court, in 2021. So this was like, I believe, right before the conservatorship was officially taken away. She said, "I think this conservatorship is abusive. I don't think I can live a full life. I feel ganged up on, I feel bullied, and I feel alone. My dad and anyone involved in this conservatorship, including my management, they should all be in jail."
Wow.
And so I found that really moving, and I was like, "You know what? Good for her for finally speaking up. That had to be so scary." And she's been controlled by these people for nearly 15 years.
Yeah,
And
and they
good
would
for her.
threaten to take, like, her visitation rights away.
Yeah, they would use her children as
Yes.
blackmail. Yeah. Going back to Jamie, there was, a altercation that happened, at one point where he got in, his grandson's father, so this is Kevin's face and was like, I am unclear whether it's known that he became, like, physically aggressive or if this is just what's, like, alleged. Do you know anything about this, Rachel?
I think that I heard there was a physical altercation and he
Yeah.
harmed one of his grandsons, so Kevin filed for a restraining order.
Yes, and I believe it was granted, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, again, it just shows how, like, why is this person being someone's conservator who literally cannot make sound decisions about a child, you know?
Yeah.
Nonetheless, this incredibly famous and wealthy woman, like, why would he be put in charge of her?
Right. And just back to financials, when she booked her residency in Las Vegas, I watched the documentary Framing Britney Spears, which is an amazing New York Times documentary.
Mm.
And they said that at one point while she was doing her residency, she was making over $1 million into her account every week.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And how much of that did she see? Like,
Well,
there
Jamie got 1.5% of all revenue from, well, from her tours. But and plus he was paying himself that salary, like the
yeah.
overinflated salary from this position that he just put himself into. Just
Yeah. Yeah. And just to
horrific.
be clear, Jamie was not the only one making money off of this conservatorship. There was also a whole management team and legal team who were also making quite a bit of money, more than Jamie was making,
Yeah.
just because she was in a conservatorship. So they were like doing this extra work.
And they were making Brittany pay or her estate pay for all of the lawyers involved, both
Yes.
on Jamie's side and on Brittany's side.
Yeah. And actually, this only got settled in, um, I think it was earlier this year, that they went back to court to settle who was gonna, like, pay the remaining lawyer fees and stuff. Yeah, April of this year, so we are recording this in September of 2024. So, literally less than 6 months ago, this was all just finally settled. We don't know what happened, it's not public record, but we know that Brittany and her dad went to court because there was gonna be another entire case about it unless they settled, and that they did end up settling. So we're not sure if Brittany was forced to pay the rest of the legal fees or if Jamie had to pay it or what the situation was, but it was not until less than 6 months ago that that was finally all completed.
Right. So that's over 13 years of this conservatorship and all of this exploitation of Britney
Yeah.
going on. In the midst of all of this, like 2019, I think it began, the Free
Mhm.
Britney movement started by her fans who had picked up on what was going on with
Mhm.
Britney and were finding messages in her social media posts
Mhm.
and had the inkling that she was not okay and that she was being held against her will.
Mhm.
So there were protests and just action by her fans taken that got a lot of media attention.
Yes. And one of the things that happened in 2019 was her dad, Jamie Spears, had a major health emergency. His colon ruptured, which is life threatening. And so he, during that time, was taken off the conservatorship. But she reported to have committed herself to like a voluntary mental health clinic where she went and checked into because she said essentially, like, this is all really affecting my mental health. I need to focus on me. I think were her exact words or something close to it. However, then something was released that was like, wait, she's actually been in this clinic much longer than than when her dad's colon ruptured. And so one of the paralegals involved in the conservatorship actually started posting anonymously online. Like, this is not what you think it is. She's not voluntarily there. And that is really where Free Britney like truly started. And my gosh, it became a massive movement. And the timing was 2019, but then it was continuing into 2020 when we were all staying home with the COVID virus. And I think the internet like really bonded a lot of people together during this time. A lot of people were spending much more time on the internet than before. And so that really actually allowed the Free Britney movement to become really large and a lot of people really involved in it. I mean, there were famous people such as Sarah Jessica Parker, who spoke out and said, like, I'm in support of Free Britney.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So a lot of trauma going
Yeah,
on, without a doubt, a lot of manipulation. Um, so as we're talking about mental health and diagnoses, of how we're just like really processing this case as mental health therapists. I think it's important that we mention again, we've never treated these people. These are not official diagnoses. This is us just having a conversation to bring more awareness. I agree with everything you've said so far, Rachel, that clearly there's a substance use disorder going on, that it seems as though there's narcissism for,
yes,
I don't know how you could do this to someone and not be a narcissist.
especially your own family.
Yes. Yeah. To think that you are so important and you don't need to put your daughter's needs first is concerning. It really is. And it's really amazing in the worst way possible how the American legal system let Jamie be her conservator for nearly 15 years. I mean,
Yeah. She lost so much time from her life. It is so sad.
yeah. At the time, her fiance, the man she was engaged to, she went on the record saying, like, we would have loved to have a child. And they were unable to conceive this whole time because she had this IUD in that she was not allowed to go to the doctor to have removed. Also, just speaking to women's health a little bit, I know many people who have attempted to have IUDs put in, and it's incredibly painful, and just different people's bodies respond differently to it. And so, all of that to say, I just know even having an IUD put in can be quite an ordeal.
Yes.
And so just to force someone to do that and not make the own decision for their body about what birth control they're gonna use or what family planning strategy they're gonna use is wild.
It truly is. And it's just so sad that they took that away from her, like a chance to be a mother again.
Yeah, yeah, it's horrible. Um, yeah, I mean, what else have we missed, Rachel? We've talked a lot about Jamie's mental health. We've touched on Brittany's, what seems to
Yeah,
be postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety. I wonder if she, has some form of PTSD with
I was thinking that.
the paparazzi stalking her,
Losing her kids,
losing her kids, yes, her dad being an alcoholic, like, there's a lot going on there, and
and
her
then
book
being
really
yeah,
speaks more to her childhood and some of the traumas she endured then too.
right, and then being in the conservatorship itself, even if she hadn't experienced
Yes.
any of that, I would say is warrants PTSD.
Yeah, I agree, it's incredibly traumatic. Um, and so much of this, like, could have been solved so quickly, and I think because she was on such a huge pedestal, like, in our society, that they really then tore her down so much. I wonder if she had been a man,
It
what
never would have happened if she
the
was a man.
yeah, the conservatorship never would have happened, the just, like, public, um
Vilification.
yes, thank you, that's a great word, public
Mhm.
vilification of, really who she is would never have happened. And so I think that's an important thing to remember in all of this. Like, again, it brings us back to the misogyny, that is just so evident in this case.
Yeah, and if this could happen to this global superstar,
Yeah,
this abuse of the conservatorship,
yeah.
think how much it could happen to you or me, anyone.
Yes, and there wouldn't be a free Britney movement, right? Like, if
Right,
that
yeah,
happened to me, there would never be a free Joni movement, and, like, I'm just your
definitely.
average person, and I know that there are other famous people who and it seems to happen to child stars who then become adults. And so I know that Amanda Bynes at least has been in a conservatorship with her parents. I'm unclear if she still is. But there are definitely other people that this happens to. And really, the purpose of a conservatorship, I know Rachel touched on this earlier, but the true purpose is normally for someone with dementia or someone with an end of life disease, and they're unable to make, healthy choices for themselves.
Yes,
Um, and usually the choices being like they're trying to drive when they are reckless drivers now, or they can't remember anything about their finances, and so they can't make financial decisions. And so there is a time and a place for a conservatorship, but not for a young mom in her 20s who, needed what she really needed was mental health care, not a conservatorship.
yeah, I completely agree with that. I
Yeah.
think that's so accurate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, I wanted to touch on her freedom now and
Okay.
just how she presents
Okay.
as just a person on her social media accounts now that she is free.
Mhm.
Some people are concerned
Mm.
because of somewhat like she spins a lot, like
Okay.
a lot of spinning. Do you
Yeah.
follow?
I've seen a lot of her social media posts.
Yes, and
Yeah.
some of them, like, they sound concerning, but I
Yeah.
think anyone would post that way or,
Mhm.
have some kind of repercussions after having been through what she's been through.
Yeah. I mean, even the fact that she was medicated for so many years, and without consent, without her own consent. And just I mean, we know research shows that trauma affects the brain so deeply that a lot of times when we experience trauma, we have this like mental and emotional stunted growth at the age of when we experience the trauma. And so I can only imagine that what's happening for her is she feels like a young adult or a little kid again because she has all this freedom that
Yeah.
she's never truly had. And so I can't imagine what that feels like. I don't know. I see those posts and I'm kind of like, you know what? Good for her. Like
Yeah.
she clearly has been in need of this sort of independence. Um,
Right.
and so who's to
Also,
say that we want to do that too? I don't
yeah,
know.
definitely. But one also other thing that I wanted to mention
Mhm.
was I've read reports that her net worth now is $60 million, which by any stretch is a lot of money.
Yeah.
But if she was making $1 million a week just in 1 year, where
Yeah.
did all of that money go?
Yeah. That is a really good point.
Yeah.
Because if I'm not sure she did that for a whole year, but if she would have, that would have been over $50 million
Yes,
alone.
definitely for 1 year. And she was forced to perform for over a decade.
Wow.
I
That
wonder,
is incredibly frustrating and unfair, for
yeah,
her.
I wonder if Jamie has like some kind of like bank account off the Cayman Islands or something with all of her money.
That you always hear about that, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
man.
It is wild. She deserves so much better. It really, one of the themes I kept coming back to in all of this research is it feels like she was punished for nearly a decade and a half because she had mental health struggles. Like she
Yeah.
was just being punished for being a human and having some mental health issues. And what she needed was someone to come alongside her and be like, "Hey, let's get you help. Let's go to rehab if that's needed. Let's go to a treatment center." But no one needed to take control of her life. And in fact, it made her mental health, I would argue, it made her mental health much worse than it would have if she had just received help.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a very current case, and we love hearing from you all, your opinion and what you think of this. I think it's important to have these conversations. And we do just want to always offer some resources for anyone listening. If you or someone you know is in need of help, please call 988 to access the National Suicide and Crisis Line. For additional resources, please visit NAMI, NAMI.org. Thank you for listening.